you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
I'm the Walrus. Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Just been revoked.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Because it is my name!
I see dead.
Today, Junior?
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What?
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
The price is wrong, bitch.
Welcome to Critics Not Cynics, the podcast that tries to prove that you can be a critic without being a cynic. And this week, if you couldn't tell by the background, we are finally getting the last bit of What If reviewed.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, like this episode of the podcast might be relatively short. Leslie and I both are kind of worn out from our day jobs right now, and we were both talking like we're just kind of exhausted. So if we're low energy or we don't have like a super long hour-and-a-half review like we did with Dune, apologies. We're just trying to fit things in, and we just obviously we want to keep to a regular schedule.
And we didn't want to leave it hanging and not finish out the rest
that
of
as
the
well.
season.
And we've got to continue on with our MCU franchise reviews, so that's going to be coming up here in a week or so, depending just on other circumstances. I think both of us are not getting a chance to get out and see Eternals this weekend, this past weekend, as of this is going to
As of
Monday.
when you're listening to it.
So yeah, it's just we got a lot of different things going on. Of course, work has been really nuts this past week for us, so we're just trying to make sure we get something out there for you guys, and we figured if we could just kind of rush through, well, not super rush through, but just do a quick overview of those last 4 or 5 episodes of What If, and then hopefully, everything else in the coming weeks will be fine. If you joined us for the Halloween live stream, I want to apologize for it getting kind of cut off mid-stream. As I keep saying, I'm constantly learning OBS and trying to make sure I know everything that's going on, and I hadn't realized that the stream had dropped frames, and then basically I'd cut the stream out. But we're going to keep trying. I think as of when this releases, there might have been an attempt to do another one, so hopefully that one went fine. But yeah, we're going to try it a little bit more, because that's one thing I think we'd want to do here at the podcast is maybe have one episode at one point where we're all here together live and you guys can join in on the conversation. I also, before, and I haven't really actually talked to Leslie about this, but I need to pull it up. I do want to give a shout out to someone who commented on our Dune review, and they ended up subscribing. And I think they added some really cool points of the conversation, and they had some different criticisms of Dune that, I think are valid, even though we enjoyed it a little bit more. I think it was really cool to actually have this, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I pull this up right without any videos playing or whatever. So it will be in YouTube Studio. There we go. Come on. And there we go. Wait, where are they? There we go. So, shout out to Hog Scraper. He is a new subscriber to the channel too, so I really appreciate that. So just if you've watched our Dune review, obviously some of this stuff will make sense. If it doesn't make sense, go check out our Dune review. But I just want to kind of talk about it because this is the first time. One thing we've really wanted to have is interaction with an audience and hear what you guys thought. And I feel like this would be kind of nice to touch base on. So he said, they said, I tried to like the movie, but it was an 1.5-hour movie stretched out to 2.5 hours with only long shots of not much to fill in that hour. That and Jason Momoa and Zendaya seemed like they were playing themselves instead of the characters they were cast as. Every line they spoke felt like they were both cast because they're popular and not because they were a good fit, which was weird since nearly everyone else felt awesome in the role they were playing, especially Paul's parents and Baron Harkonnen. I really love the way they did the Sardaukar and the weirding way. Glad I watched at home, though I have the patience to read all the books multiple times. I barely had the patience to sit through the movie. Just felt like Dune, as made by the camcorder kid from American Beauty. And then they kind of went further on because I did ask. I think it was a very valid criticism, and stuff that we didn't get to really touch base on in our review, mainly because we talked a lot about different things. But I kind of just asked, like, did that turn you off from the film? Because obviously. That was one thing we talked about was that runtime and whether or not that would scare people off. And the nice thing is they responded back saying definitely going to watch part 2. They managed to watch all the Transformer movies, so they're willing to give anything a chance. And then they referenced, like we talked about, Paul and JD and Lady Jessica's story are a major part of it, of the early story, and interested to see where they go. And that they didn't hate the film, but they say they didn't enjoy the entire experience either, and that the dual release, if there weren't a dual release, they probably would have been more disappointed if they had spent money seeing it in the theater, not being able to take a bathroom break or grab a pizza, kind of would have been a little bit more difficult for them. So I really appreciate them commenting, and I think you would agree it's very valid criticisms that they have.
I still think the point about like making it 45 minutes or 55-minute episodes, if it was an episodic thing, and it would be smaller chunks for people to watch, and then also giving them time to get into the depth of that book. Just considering the first book, like not any of the rest, but into the depth of that book in particular. There's so much, and I do agree. Like a lot of the shots, like an hour and a half or hour and 45 minutes spread out to 2, is just beautiful landscape shots that you can sit back and admire how gorgeous these shots are. But it is like pads it out to like 2 hours. Right.
So I definitely wanted to give them a shout out because they brought up some really good points and points I can't necessarily disagree with either. And yeah, I can say, like, probably because I like Jason Momoa, like, it didn't bother me as much if, like, they had that reaction where it just felt like it was Jason Momoa and not, Duncan, Idaho. And that's understandable. There are those actors who, when they're in a role, you see the actor. I think the biggest one would be, like, Denzel Washington. You're seeing Denzel. You're not necessarily seeing the character he's playing. Will Smith also being the same. Like, if you're typically going to go see a movie with Will Smith in it, you're seeing it for Will Smith, not necessarily who he's playing or what the story is. But I was really glad to get some engagement on that, and it's the first time I can say we can reference somebody's thoughts on the podcast. So really, really happy. Even though we don't see completely eye to eye, I do again think that it's very valid criticisms and very good points that were made. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just dive into it. So where we left off was, Doctor Strange, which I think still, after seeing the whole season as a whole, the Doctor Strange episode is still the best episode.
Yeah, it's the best episode by far, I think.
Not that any of the other episodes were like extremely bad, but there was just something that they did about that. And Pat is not here, but he has seen that episode, and he and I were arguing about this on lunch break today, where he was kind of trying to wrap his head around the fixed point in time with Christine dying, and like, well, but there's a multiverse, so that would negate the fixed point in time, and I had to try to get him to understand. I don't think he still understood that, it's a fixed point of time within that particular universe. Like, just because there's a multiverse where instead he loses, the ability to use his hands, the nexus point, or that very important fixed point in time, is important to that universe, and that's why that universe ultimately dies. So, and he was like, but, and I'm like, okay, let's go with the Doctor Who explanation, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. If you think too hard about time travel and about alternate realities, you're going to end up just burning out your brain. So
yeah, just overcomplicating it, especially when the whole point of this is just what if this happened, quite literally the title, and it's just supposed to be a thought exercise, and if you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, you didn't. I
mean, even though we'll say you're wrong if you didn't enjoy this episode, but and he did enjoy the episode, but that was just one thing he had a difficulty wrapping his head around, and I was just like, you're thinking too hard about it, Yeah. So it picks up with episode 5, What If Zombies?
Yeah.
And I've heard some very interesting and not wrong criticisms of this episode too, where it felt rushed for a lot of people, and I can kind of understand that, especially if you're familiar with like the Marvel Zombies comics, that it's just kind of like rushes through the story, puts Bruce through the ringer with everything, and we're just kind of catching up really quickly with zombie Iron Man, zombie Cap, and everything, and then just kind of rushing to the end where you have zombie Thanos waiting in Wakanda for everyone, and that's where the episode ends, and like everyone wants to see that next bit. What are they going to do when they arrive in Wakanda and they've got zombie Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet? But I think with that particular episode, it's enjoy it for what it is. It's a fun ride.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a fun ride. I like the Peter doing the little, like, how to survive the zombie apocalypse, when he's doing his little thing. And I like just the interesting... Of course, the whole point of whatever, just the interesting mixture of different characters or getting to see how they interact.
Right.
Of course, it was hilarious to watch Okoye like slice Sam in half after just having watched, Falcon and Winter Soldier. And I should be sad, Bucky, but I'm not.
Right.
Just a continuation of their weird, and sarcastic, snarky friendship. But it's just interesting, different combination of people. I liked Hope a lot in this one, which of course with her sacrifice, but I just the one thing that felt plot holey to me was like how slowly she turned to a zombie and how fast others did. But other than that, I was fine with that episode. I can see if you were like really excited to like do MCU like Avengers zombies, like this isn't the full this isn't you getting a whole series of zombies, right. Basically. Like, you probably wanted maybe its own separate show even, or something like that, and that's definitely not at all what this is.
Yeah,
but they gave you a little bit. They gave you a taste.
it could have benefited, like... it would depend on how they initially planned to structure out the series. Like, if these were not going to be, like, a little bit interconnected like they ended up being... and just we're like, okay, we're going to do 3 episodes focused on What If Zombies, and then, tell a little whole story arc within those 3 episodes, and then move on to the next, like, What If story. But, like, that would be more understandable in a series like, think of, like, Batman the Animated Series or Superman the Animated Series, where you have 22 episodes, or even 50 episodes for a whole cartoon season, and you can take that time to spend it on 3 episodes purely focused on zombies, rather than getting 9 for a season and trying to tell an overarching story through most of it. So yeah, I can understand the disappointment, but we do have a season 2 coming, and my guess is we'll revisit that world, especially with as kind of enticing as that ending is. Like, I don't think they're just going to leave it there. So that's really all kind of to say about that episode, because it's just enjoyable. It's fast paced. It's over before you know it, but it's just fun. Then we come to episode 6, and what if Killmonger rescued Tony? And
yeah.
I have to restrain myself on a lot of the stuff that I want to talk about with this one because it gets political for me. And as anyone who's listened to the podcast for a while, we try to leave politics out of this. We do have our own personal beliefs, but we try to, approach it from the entertainment perspective and escapism. Don't want to really kind of branch into that whole political world. So I'm not going to say too much about this episode, except for this is the most disappointing episode. It's mostly the episode that just feels like a missed opportunity because ultimately they could have gone one way with it and they decided to go with the easy route and saying that they could have made Killmonger a hero.
Yeah, that's my biggest disappointment with this episode is that they didn't make Killmonger a hero in this episode. Especially
if, like the rumors about what they're going to do with Black Panther 2 with, Chadwick Boseman passing away and what they're going to do about T'Challa, like the rumors bringing somehow Killmonger back from the dead or something like that. Like this was their opportunity to introduce Killmonger from the multiverse and then at some point get him involved in the mainline MCU 616 universe.
Right, and introduce him here as a hero, like the whole time, and never having done that other, our universe Killmonger.
Right.
Like that was the most disappointing thing about this episode because I try not to like peek at all the episode titles or whatever, but when they're coming on, and it's like, what if Killmonger? And I'm like, oh, we're gonna get like hero Killmonger. This is gonna fit perfect for the upcoming movie. Like all my expectations went a certain way, and it didn't go that way at all in this episode. And I'm just like, it really fell flat.
No, we basically just got a retelling of Black Panther, but just that where Killmonger wins, essentially.
Pretty much. It was almost exactly the same. Obviously not exact situations, but if you just like look at point by point, it was pretty much exactly the same.
Right.
And that was the most disappointing thing. Although I would argue the next episode was like the most lackluster blah one for me.
Well, I won't necessarily disagree with you on that one either. I think that the next episode also, so these kind of two paired are disappointing episodes because they really feel like nothing. Like there's ultimately
you can
no
skip
point
both
to
of them and still understand what's happening in the finale and not even need either of these episodes.
I think you only need the ending scene from the next episode, and that's it. Because that's where you get Ultron. Kind of just that like one sequence there is the only thing from the Thor episode that you kind of maybe need, but not even really that, because they do go into pretty much great detail in episode 8 about what's going on with Ultron. But I think that this was a really missed opportunity, and I think that there's a poorly played out conversation, or at least the missed point conversation between Tony and Killmonger that if I were to get political, I'd go into greater detail. But I think the fact that that conversation's in there and Tony approaches it in the manner which I think is the right manner to approach it, and Killmonger takes the negative approach to it, that's where it's like you're missing the whole point. Like you're missing Tony's point. There was no difference between him and Killmonger. He saw no differences. And for Killmonger to go, yeah, that's the problem, that's what really killed the episode for me. Without really going into spoilers and what happens in that scene, that's what kills the episode for me, because it's like you're proving a point that doesn't need to be proved, that we have tried to disprove as, been in existence for a while, and now you're kind of solidifying it or codifying it within this conversation. And that's about as much as I'll say on it, because I could really dive into how bad that dialogue
So what if Thor
is.
was an only child?
Yeah, basically. So ultimately, we get a good episode with Marvel Zombies, and then we get kind of a lackluster, disappointing, easy way out episode with Killmonger.
Yeah, I feel like the takeaway from Killmonger is that probably, I don't know because I didn't watch a ton of reviews, but I I assume that a lot of people might have ended up with the same expectations I had when it was coming on, and also thinking about the rumors about the next Black Panther movie and having all these expectations that this is how they're going to do it, and being disappointed like I was. So I feel like that's probably the main reason why people feel or would feel like this one fell flat.
And I would agree too. I think I read a little bit too much into it in that particular scene, and I think it's just that because that particular scene's dialogue just didn't sit well with me. But ultimately, yeah, the expectation, or at least the hope, was we get to see Killmonger as a hero, and that would have been really cool. And yet, no, he's just the same villain he is in Black Panther, essentially. So now moving on to episode 7, what if Thor were an only child? Which is, like, I think the worst title too. Like, because, okay, yeah, he's an only child, but he still has a relationship with Loki. And
yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you were a big Thor fan, you'll enjoy this no matter what. I like Thor, but I'm not, like, to that level of, like, rah-rah, you know? So, to me, this was, like, the most pointless episode. I just kind of had to sit back and watch it as comedy.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's all it really was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially, like, when Blue Ice Giant Loki comes out, you know, and stuff. I did see one comment somewhere. I cannot remember where I saw it. I don't remember if I was a YouTuber. So, like, if this was your comment and you recognize it, like, all the credit goes to you. But they were like, this episode is proof that Odin ruined both their lives.
I've seen that, yeah. I saw that comment, too, as well. Like, this is Loki living his best life if he had never, never been taken by Odin. And, it ultimately, like, yeah, it's just a fun, like, almost, throwaway episode.
But for me, it's so juvenile and stupid because it's just partying.
Yeah.
And, oh no, mom's coming. And it's like, Thor is supposed to be like 3,000 something years old at this point. I don't know. But to me, it's just very much a very juvenile episode.
You don't like dude bro Thor? Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of fun with watching how his relationship with Jane develops in this. Like, it's kind of fun. And then Darcy and Howard the Duck, like, that's fun too. Doing
the Vegas wedding.
But, like, ultimately, there's no point to the episode outside of setting up that ending with Ultron coming through with, his armor and the Infinity Stones. And it just, like, is going, okay, now where's this going to go? Which, there's not much else to talk about the Thor episode, so we'll just dive into what if Ultron won? And this is a nice, well, I guess nice is not the right term to use, but dark episode showing what would have happened if, they couldn't have defeated Ultron and he got his hands on the Vision body. And the
Infinity Stones.
Well, and the Infinity Stones. But, like, that's where I was going to go. The one complaint I saw was how easily he took out Thanos with the Mind Stone. And, I think everyone, especially even with just the stones themselves, because we saw this kind of complaint with Loki, and when we're seeing Casey's desk full of all the stones, or the the variants of the stones, and that everyone was like, well, these are supposed to be the most important thing, and blah 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 blah, and it's like, okay, I understand that. Well, Thanos is supposed to be the blah 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 blah, and it's like, yeah, but also this is a different circumstance. It's a different villain. Yeah. It's Ultron wasn't there when Thanos showed up on Earth, so it's like we don't know how that confrontation would have played out, and now we're seeing Ultron at his at his second most powerful moment when Thanos shows up, and then he reaches that ultimate level enough so that he is aware of the Watcher. He takes a battle to the Watcher, and ultimately what leads into the finale. So. I think, like, we built Thanos up so much because of how piecemealed we got to see him leading up to Infinity War, and then we saw him as this ultimate force for the Avengers to go up against, because this is the toughest thing that they've come across. And I think, like, that having that expectation and seeing how all that fight plays out, you can't accept that a different circumstance leads to a different outcome, and you got to kind of just take it for what it is.
Yeah, I've kind of seen some complaints about like, well, why didn't Vision do that? But in my mind, it's kind of like, think about Superman.
Yeah.
And how much power do you think that he has? Because I saw people complaining about in the new show that like, oh, he turned his face into a punch. And I'm like, was it just me, or I was always under the assumption that he's always doing everything possible to not hurt people?
Right.
So if somebody goes to punch him and they're going to shatter their whole arm, he falls into the punch a little bit so that it doesn't shatter their whole arm. So in my mind, it's thinking about Vision doesn't think that way.
Right.
When he looked at Thanos, Vision, he's not thinking, what's the fastest, most efficient way I can kill this man? Whereas that's how Ultron works, and that's how he thinks. So Vision could still be on completely equal in power level, but that's not how he thinks. That's not his ethics, his morality, his decision making, and how he's going to make that decision.
Right.
So yes, maybe Vision could have done that, but that probably didn't occur to him to do that.
Well, there's also a couple other caveats you can throw into that too. Vision has different experiences. Look at what he did to Rhodey. Like just in complete accident, he did that to Rhodey. Yeah. He paralyzed Rhodey, and so that's something that weighs down on him. Also, he is wanting to be more human, and he's a hero, and heroes don't kill. Also,
he's worthy of the hammer.
Exactly, and he was severely injured, and by the time that he actually sees Thanos, whatever Shuri was doing with the Mind Stone and trying to get it off of him, he was weakened. He'd been stabbed several times. Like, he was not in high tier state that Ultron is in this episode. So like, there are different factors that go into that too, that I think ultimately is why both situations played out differently, because if he'd be no different than Ultron,
Exactly.
So, but one of the really cool moments, of course, of that episode is the ending when the Watcher flees back to Doctor Strange's, little bubble and, asks for his help. And then that leads us to the finale.
Well, one more thing before we go to the finale. I think one of the most low-key, because you said this is like a dark episode, but low-key creepy things is when Ultron hears the Watcher.
Yeah.
And then he's looking around, and then he's like, I see you, and the Watcher freaks out, and I'm like, okay, he's freaking out. I'm freaking out. That was super creepy, And then I start thinking about the there are no strings on me thing from Age of Ultron, and I'm like, that is super creepy. And then that really kind of solidified I like that they chose him to be the villain for this, for this story here.
Right. Well, and also because we've, this is outside of the Doctor Strange episode, this is the first time we see the Watcher really kind of interacting with anyone else. That's why when his shock of being seen by Ultron is like, wait, what? How do you see me? Yeah. And then the fact that then he shows up and it's like, this can't happen. And then the fact that he's able to hold a power level at the same level as the Watcher, and leaving the last resort being going to Doctor Strange and trying to figure out what's going to happen or how they can fight against him. So, and then of course, we also had a really cool, little side story with, Natasha and Clint, and then, finding Zola.
I want to know how on earth they were the last two survivors.
Because they wouldn't be expected to be the last two survivors, pretty much.
Well, I'm just envisioning that, everybody else with powers or enhancements or whatever were I'm going to go out there and fight, and they're just, the ultimate super spies who know how to hide and keep away, but right. I'm just like, dang, man. Also, just, looking here at IMDb, Doctor Strange episode was rated 9.0, and the What If Ultron Won is 9.1. So these are definitely up there on par episodes with ratings from IMDb.
Yeah, I think these two episodes are the highlight, and the finale kind of if you want to give them a first, second, third place. First place for me is Doctor Strange. Second place is What If Ultron Won, and then the third one, which we're going to talk about now, is What If the Watcher Broke His Oath.
Yeah.
And yet, what kind of disappoints me about this finale is how little outside the beginning the Watcher's actually involved. And I mean, it kind of has to do with the fact that he couldn't stand his ground, but like, I would have liked more involvement from the Watcher, considering that this is
more
talking,
active part.
considering the title of the episode. We also get kind of the weird Gamora and Iron Man bit, which if you're not aware of, because they have talked about this was from a scrapped episode that will be coming in season 2. So like, if you're wondering what was going on there,
did they scrap it, or they didn't have time? They didn't feel like to do it.
Season 1 was planned originally for 10 episodes, and I don't know what fell into it, but that was the episode they decided to cut. So, that was what it just ended up happening to be, and probably it was the one where they were like, okay, this is the easy one where we can just fit that particular scene and go, bam, we're good. Like, you don't need to know what played out in that entire episode prior to that, why she's wearing Thanos' armor, why his Hulkbuster armor is done with the Sakaar like paint and everything. So it was just like that one where they were like, yeah, we can revisit that at a later point. But this is where we get to see all of our heroes from pretty much all of the individual stories outside of the zombie stories kind of come together and form, well, what did they call them? The Guardians of the Multiverse?
Guardians of the Multiverse.
And then, you have a very interesting dynamic that plays a little bit with T'Challa, Star-Lord T'Challa, and Killmonger, who killed T'Challa in his universe. So,
right.
But overall, it was really fun. It was really good, nice, action-packed. Gave a little redemption arc for Doctor Strange, and you got to see some really kind of cool moments, fighting-wise, betrayal-wise. Everything played out the way it needed to play out. And then what I really liked was, because Natasha was the only one that was left from her world, from Ultron, winning, that they put her back in the world from where the Avengers were all assassinated by Hank.
Yeah.
And, was joined in the fight with Captain America, Captain Marvel, and Nick Fury. So that was really cool, really fun. But overall, yeah, I mean, I don't, because it's very action-packed, and it has been a while since I've actually watched the episode itself, that I can't remember, like, specific details and everything like that, but I had a good time with it.
I would say my top 3 people from that episode are, I keep wanting to say Haley, but I mean Peggy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say the actress instead of like, this is animation. Is Peggy, Natasha, and then Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, for me, for this whole, like, if we just look at this as like one universe this season, he's the MVP, man.
Yes.
He's the one. That episode, his standalone episode was phenomenal, and then every time we see him again in these episodes, phenomenal. And then for this episode in particular, I really liked the dynamic between Peggy and this Natasha, and then them coming together for that final, where Natasha's shooting the arrow and Peggy jumps and rips his helmet up so that it goes into his eyeball. And spoilers, just sorry, that was a little...
Well, to be fair, it's been out for a while, so like we can't spoil too much. So,
but I feel like those are like the top 3. But then just like MVP of the whole season, I feel like is Doctor Strange. His character here is great, and like a lot of the animation and stuff like that they did in episode 4 is the kind of stuff that I want to see in the movie like next year.
Yeah,
I feel like it's probably harder to do. I don't know. Like, I'm not a CGI artist or anything like that. But that kind of... I mean, even when it looks like the bug thing that was behind him and then the shadow came up and grabbed him and pulled him down. Like, all of that stuff was so freaking cool and exactly what I expect to see, like, in a Doctor Strange type movie. Like, that's what I want. That's the level. That's the bar that I've now set for the movie.
So, okay, I know, so we'll talk about kind of our overall thoughts of the season. I would like to rank it the individual episodes of 5 through, because I know we gave scores for the other ones, but considering it's been a while since I've watched them, I think we're just going to rate this season overall. But I know for you, the animation was kind of a hit or miss type of thing.
Yeah.
Like some episodes it looked really good, or at least in particular scenes it looked really well. By the time you get to episode 9, did you kind of feel that like comfort zone with the animation, or did it still at parts like look okay, and then at other parts looked really good, and other parts just meh?
I would say I felt okay with it overall, but there are still parts or certain ways that there would be animation on a face that just didn't. Not that it's terrible art, but it's just kind of like how much did you spend to do just that? Like I can do an outline of a face, sort of. I don't know, because I feel like when people are, oh, you're an artist, and I'm like, I'm not an artist at all. But when you're spending that level of money, I don't know. I know it's a style that you're going for. It's kind of, for me, the difference between going from Clone Wars to Rebels.
Yeah.
Like, Rebels animation is okay.
It grows on you.
It's not my favorite. It grows on you. But Clone Wars animation is phenomenal.
Top tier.
Loved
Top
it.
tier.
So, to me, that's like Star Wars Rebels level of like, I like some of it, you know, as far as the animation goes for this, that's kind of where I'm at. Okay. Like, it's not horrible. It's not like it put me off and I can't watch it, like, at all.
Yeah.
Like, some of the other, what was the other one? Resistance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Resistance. Resistance falls more in line with,
through.
like, the issues that this has. And I agree, like, even though with this image that's in the background, like, it looks really pretty and everything, when you're looking more at the characters straight on in their faces, and maybe most noticeably T'Challa would be kind of the best one because he's more in focus, that lack of definition outside of the, you know, the facial hair and the hair outline and his eyebrows and eyes, like there's no age, there's no texture, there's just blandness. And so when it comes to like conveying certain emotional scenes and stuff, a lot of that can be lost. And yet, you know, you can go back and say, well, Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, they don't have any definition in their face either, but yet there's this charm in that overall animation style that seems to work, and that seems to be missing here. Because this is more, like, that was hand-drawn. This is more computer animated. And
I think it's kind of the same thing, like, when you watch The Hobbit after having watched Lord of the Rings and the live-action versions, where the practical makeup was so good on the orcs, when you get to The Hobbit and they're doing pretty much exclusively, I think, CGI.
Yeah.
The effect of the orcs did not come through for me whatsoever. Like, when I watched Lord of the Rings, and I forget how old I was when we went to the theater and saw it the first time, like, I was scared of those things, man. That scared me, and I'm watching these, of course, yeah, you're older when you're seeing these, but you can tell, and yeah. I don't know if somebody has a study out there that knows, like, or how the human brain works and interprets things, but you look right at it, you automatically can tell this is fake CGI'd, and there's something about it that is not nearly as scary or intimidating as when they did the practical makeup, and that's kind of the same feeling that I get. It's very, just kind of flat, like you said, there's not texture, there's just something very, not necessarily uncanny valley, but just like it's that flat, shiny. There's nothing there. So of course this isn't meant to scare me, but there's also nothing there, like you said, emotional wise, to really pull me into it.
Right. I almost think like it could have benefited if it had gone like the Clone Wars Bad Batch like type animation where they use that style to animate it, and where it feels more kind of real world-ish in that sense. But also that costs a lot more money and more time and more effort. Whereas like this, they could probably knock out, in a quicker time. Especially they've got 9 more episodes planned and everything like that, and who knows where they're going to take it. Especially considering that we're coming up with Kang here soon and all that stuff, and. We got Eternals releasing, and who knows what Eternals is spawning. Although it kind of scares me with Eternals, and this is kind of leading into why we're not rushing out to the theater to go see it, is like, one, it's a bunch of different characters that they're cramming into a movie, and we can see that it works sometimes if it's handled correctly, like with Guardians of the Galaxy and James Gunn. And then it can be handled incorrectly, like Suicide Squad was, with the same amount of characters, but crunching those characters. Not the James Gunn Suicide Squad, the David Ayer Suicide Squad, where they crammed all these characters together, tried to emulate Guardians, and it didn't work. And Eternals seems kind of like, oh, here's these 6 all-powerful characters. They've been on Earth for thousands of years. There you go. Like, just deal with it. Don't care about the backstory or whatever. And then when Marvel has come out, because I know it's also the most negatively reviewed Marvel movie so far, when the studio comes out and says, we're not planning a sequel, that's concerning. And it tells me, like, this is a one-off. It may have set up some characters like Black Knight. I think that's his character name. But whoever Kit Harington is playing, he is going to have more of probably a role outside of the Eternals themselves. But, like, ultimately, it's a 2.5-hour movie where it's already almost guaranteed it's not going to get a sequel. It's being poorly received. It's also being banned from certain countries because of some stuff that's in it that is not acceptable in those countries. Whether that's right or wrong, that's up to whatever your personal beliefs are. I personally don't care. I don't care for it to be shoved in my face, but if it's in the movie, it's in the movie. I'm not going to let that deter me from watching the movie, but it does concern me when the studio comes out and says, yeah, we're not planning necessarily for a sequel.
Well, I feel like, I think we were talking about this before. I don't know, like, when they're in the planning room, and how long ago that was, when they're pitching their ideas for what's going to come after, the Infinity War saga. Like, who was like, we need to do Eternals, and then I feel like, like that's the number one mistake. Like, why? Because then you look at the rest of the movies, and this one does not seem to fit.
Right.
Really. But then the second failing is it really feels like they just thought, we'll get this star-studded cast to make a splash, and you'll come to see it because you want to see Angelina Jolie, and you want to see Kit Harington, and you want to see, what's his name, who played his brother Rob. And, like, that's it. Yeah. Because as far as I know, the Eternals aren't, like, big characters. They're not even big in the comics,
no.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, do they, like, they didn't have tons of runs, and, like, people are buying up these comics, and they're making all kinds of stories, and they're not even that big in the comics, so this is kind of like, why?
Yeah, they're very
why did
niche.
You pick this one? Like, and what's the point? Because we were talking about, we had Black Widow, and then you'll have Shang-Chi, you'll have the next Doctor Strange movie, and I forget what all. Spider-Man. I have a list somewhere, but nowhere in these upcoming movies does Eternals feel like it fits.
Right, unless like there's something that's within the movie, which I don't even think it's necessarily within the movie itself. I think it's post-credit scenes being set up for future storylines for whoever, like, I don't know because I haven't seen it, and I certainly wouldn't spoil that for anyone right now either, but like, I feel like that's all they focused on was, who cares about what we're going to say about in the movie? What we're really shooting for is we've got a really killer post-credit scenes, and, like, that's what we want. Like,
I don't know if tons of people are running out to see it this weekend, but I thought I might give it a week or two just to avoid any crowds.
I checked, because we're recording this on Friday. I checked this morning because I wasn't sure if Pat and I were going to get a chance to go out and see it this weekend, and, I hadn't gotten any confirmation from him if he was available yet. And I looked at the 11 o'clock in the morning showtime, and there were still several seats. Now, yes, that's Saturday morning, but for a Marvel movie, even when we saw, like, Shang-Chi on a Saturday morning, there were seats filled up. And even, it's a day away after, from recording. The fact that an 11 o'clock in the morning showtime on a Saturday when, no one's got school, no one's got work, and over 95% of the seats are still available
on an opening weekend for the movie.
That's concerning. That's very, very concerning. I also don't like that the sites like IGN and everywhere else are like, okay, well, now that the movie's out, let's go ahead and talk about that post-credit scene. It's like, okay, not everyone got to go see it on the Thursday midnight release. Not everyone's getting out to see it Friday. And from that, look at that ticket sales, it doesn't even look like people are going to go out and see it on Saturday. So, come on now, right? Like, give it a week before you start talking about it.
Yeah, a few days before you start posting your spoilers everywhere.
Right. Well, IGN's been notorious because they were notorious with Loki. Like, one of the reasons why I was watching Loki first thing in the morning was like, I'm not having them spoil it, because they're already posting up images and stuff like that where it's like, okay. And I mean, I saw enough people in the comments going, hey, guys, cut it out. Like, we haven't even had a chance to watch it. I don't get to watch these until Friday, and they're coming out on Wednesday. So, like, give till the weekend, or something like that.
Well, like, why can't they format their, it doesn't show, so you have to actually click through to then see the rest. Like, why not just format your site that way?
Because that requires work and effort, and no one cares apparently. Plus, it's the internet. You venture on your own peril. But to get back on topic here,
on track.
Yes, as we went off on a little bit of a tangent there. So overall, I think I'd give the season. I'd go with like a 3.5 out of 5. Because ultimately, like when I look again at the list of the episodes, there are really only a small amount that I'm like, those were fantastic. Those were really good. They fired on all cylinders. The animation looked great. The story was great. The voice acting was great. I think one thing that they need to consider moving forward with season 2 is to try to contract all of the actors for their roles. Not to say that voice actors did a bad job. I mean, because we've talked about it in the previous review. The one who does Steve does a really good job as Steve, but for some of the other characters, it didn't quite work. And even though Tony was very close, Tony was one of the ones where it did not fit the most for me. And I'm not saying they're going to get Robert Downey Jr. back, but I think Gamora, they needed to get Zoe Saldana back for her role. Because I even think rest his soul, like one of the really cool moments in that final episode is having Chadwick Boseman voice T'Challa, and you've got Michael B. Jordan voicing Killmonger, and having this dialogue that's taking place between them has more of an impact than if it were another voice actor doing one of their roles. I don't think Doctor Strange would have been as fantastic if Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't doing his voice. And
didn't already have VO experience.
Well, that too. But I don't think if you watch episode 4 and you've got someone trying to emulate Benedict Cumberbatch emulating an American accent for Doctor Strange, I don't think you're going to get the same effect or that same emotional heft from episode 4 and the payoff in episode 9 that you would if you have a different voice actor. So just something for consideration forward. I think if they're doing any more Ultron, I think they're having Ross Marquand do Ultron instead of trying to get James Spader back for anything, which is that's okay. I like James Spader as Ultron, but ultimately he's not an important enough character for me to be like, no, it has to be. But it was also important though that they had Josh Brolin come back for Thanos. So, it's something to consider. I think Lake Bell does a fine Natasha, but I think it would have been better had Scarlett Johansson been doing Natasha. Not that I think that that's ever going to happen again, considering I don't think she has a good relationship with Disney anymore. So
yeah, on a total tangent, I saw some just conspiracy theory basically of this is how they can get Natasha back into the MCU in live action, and I'm like, after that, I do not think they're gonna have Scarlett Johansson back.
Nope.
Right or wrong, whatever your thoughts are, I do not think they are contracting her again ever.
And personally, I don't think they need to, because I think they gave her as rushed as it is, they gave her a complete story. But I don't necessarily think that she was in the wrong for saying hey, this wasn't part of my contract. No, I'm not. I don't disagree with that either. And the fact that they settled means they kind of realized that they were a little bit in the wrong too. But
But yeah, I don't think she's coming back.
No,
so
no.
I think the future of Black Widow is Yelena.
Yeah. And Florence Pugh will do a good job. I think she's a very talented actress. I would like to see more of her in the future. So I think she can carry on that role very well. And so who knows? Maybe we'll be seeing her in Hawkeye here in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So what score do you give it here?
I'm kind of debating. I feel like I want to do 3.75. Just like I don't want to go a full 4, but I feel like 3.5 is a little too low.
Okay.
Because like for me, I have 4 standout episodes of 9. So I'm like, it's a little bit closer to a 4, especially just because I loved that Doctor Strange episode so much, and I like his arc here so much that it's like I can pretty much ignore the other episodes, basically watch episode 1, episode 4, and then 8 and 9, and that's it. That's all I need. I don't need anything else from this season.
Okay, that's understandable, and I can give you that. That was the thing too. Like I thought about revisiting these before we recorded this episode. I'm like, I don't really feel a need to. But again, also too, if it were like, because one thing I think that they need to do is release these on home release at some point, because there are people like me who would like to own these, like WandaVision, even Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, all on like home video. You know, that's just
Blu-ray or whatever.
That's the type of like collector I am, and I would rather they not just stick to digital only or access through Disney Plus only. So, you know, and who knows? We'll see what happens with season 2. Maybe it'll improve. Maybe it'll just be more of the same. They haven't really said when season 2 will be coming. My guess is, depending on how quickly they can do all the voice recording, the animation, you might want to see like next summer, I think, being a potential next summer or next fall being the next potential release of a new season. And it could be sooner. Sometimes they turn around animation shows pretty quickly. So, but I don't have any more to say. And of course, I always I always end up kicking myself in the butt because I say we're going to record a short episode, and then we end up recording a 50-minute episode. So.
Was it full 50 minutes, or because we have there's like a little timer?
No, for OBS is the more accurate one since it's actually recording. So we're actually at a 50-minute mark right now.
Okay.
like
it's because we get off on tangents.
We get off on tangents, and then we were talking about how we were going to open up the episode, and then I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention the fact that we were going to talk about a commenter's comment on our Dune review, so that kind of threw it off too. But I would definitely say What If is a recommend. If you haven't watched it, definitely check it out. Just know that there are some episodes that are lackluster, and then there are some episodes that are really good. Now, I think the difference between this and like something like Loki or WandaVision is I think you can give it more concessions because it is telling more episodic stories, where they're more self-contained. One doesn't necessarily, at least until like about the final episode, really have any connection to the other episodes. So, if you didn't like one, good news is it doesn't really matter that much if you didn't really like it, because like you said, you could go back and revisit episode 1, episode 4, and 8 and 9. Like, those are the important ones to you. And pretty much about the important ones to me. I would revisit 5 just because it's kind of fun with the zombies. But I'm a horror fan. So, like, that's... I don't get turned off by the brains or anything like that. So.
And if anybody had the chance to go to Avengers Campus, they had Zombie Cap.
Oh, that's right. You were telling me about that.
Yeah.
So,
I was watching the Tim Tracker, and they went and saw Zombie Cap.
Well, hopefully at some point, when things get back to normal, we'll have to try to plan a group trip out there for the podcast and see if we can record some stuff for it. Well, that's one thing I gotta say. I know we're still small on YouTube and we're still small in general, but I am liking the more exposure we're getting on YouTube. I'm liking, the better quality we've brought to the show. So we're constantly improving. That's all I've been saying for years.
We're trying.
We are trying. If you couldn't tell, our heart is into it. The one thing we can't do is just do this full time. So, we got
to work around the day job.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty much just
Pay them
learning
bills.
learning OBS by accident. You know, like once I screw something up, I'm like, okay, I know not to do that. So, and you know, thankfully, like Google helps out a little bit, but you know, what ended up as a great thing for our Dune review was the fact that we screwed up I screwed up. It was my fault. 2 recordings, and then we managed to come at it with a better standpoint, better way to present it. So, you know, just bear with us. You know, we're not experienced, but we're getting the experience. So we really appreciate it. And yeah, if you comment on the videos, we'll gladly read your comments and, you know, give you some airtime and, you know, talk about what we feel if you're right or where you're wrong. Obviously with the comment earlier, I think he was more right, or they were more right, than they were wrong. And they brought up some points that we had talked about with that runtime, with Leslie talking about how it was better, may have been better fitted as a series, you know, so someone doesn't feel overwhelmed. And the benefit of the home versus the theater release, that dual release being a very positive impact on their viewing experience, because they had issues with the pacing, they had issues with the runtime, and had they wasted money in the theater, they would have been more upset with it. So, all right. Well, as always, you can, you know, like, share, subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube. If you're listening on audio only, we're on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, Google Play, just about wherever you can get your podcast. You can follow us on social media, on Twitter at criticsnotcynics, and on Facebook at criticsnotcynics podcast. And you can write into the podcast if you don't feel comfortable, you know, leaving a comment on YouTube or anything. You can write into us at criticsnotcynics@gmail.com, and we will read your comment on air if you want to, or we can, you know, just acknowledge it and you know, give our thoughts. But all right, guys, we will talk to you next time.